Greetings, everyone. Hopefully, this video finds you doing well. I am sitting here on a Tuesday morning, still in the post bliss phase of having completed the game for the first time, but I still have a lot of videos that I have to record, and of course, we're doing our sorcerer playthrough as well. And one of the things I wanted to get out there was my favorite boss fights of the game, because there are a ton of really cool boss fights in Baldur's Gate 3. And I think one of the really interesting things that Larian Studios did was handcrafting all of these fights so that they play one way on Explorer mode, and then, oh, you want to play in Tactician? We're going to throw a bunch of extra stuff into the Tactician mode, which is a lot of work in terms of the programmers coming in and everybody fine-tuning these encounters for various levels of difficulty, but it also makes for a curated experience that lent itself to some really, really cool boss fights throughout the game. Now, I've recorded around 50 of these boss fights on my channel since I played the game through early access into live, whether it's the Big Bad Boss Fight series or the How to Defeat X Boss mob. And I don't think I came across everything because I know some of the bosses on my list were optional, and other people have come across things that I haven't seen. So hopefully I'll see more when I go through with the sorcerer, and I'll push out some more videos in this series. But we are going to be showing at least a list of all the big boss fights that I came up against, and the ones that stood out to me as my favorites. So this is sort of the spoiler part of the video where I'm giving a spoiler warning to those of you who might not have finished the game yet, in that I'm going to be sharing maybe not footage of all of the fights here, but I am going to be showing a list of all the fights and talking about all the boss fights that we came across and the ones that I particularly loved. And some of these might spoil some story elements for you. So just want to make sure that you don't accidentally have something spoiled if you don't want it to be. This is your only warning, so don't forget to pause and think about it before you go any forward. But if you're okay with that, cool, let's roll. And if you're new here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because we're not going anywhere. And even though Baldur's Gate 3 is not our main game at the moment, we're still playing through. I've got the Sorcerer going through. We've got more videos coming up, so stay tuned for all that stuff. In the meantime, let's go ahead and switch over here and start to look at some of the early fights that we can get into. And I know this doesn't have all Baldur's Gate 3. There's some other stuff in here as well, but I use the boss tag, and for the most part, we should be able to see most of these. And of course, I also have the How to Defeat X boss or X encounter as we go through. So I'm going to look at this list here and think about the early stages of the game. I know one of the first big surprises for me in early access was probably the spectator fight. That one stood out to me as sort of oh wow, that is a really, really cool fight, because it was a surprise to see a spectator in the game. I mean, it's a beholder type, so I felt like that was a super cool thing to have in there. And it's when you get to the Underdark, obviously, and it's just a really, really cool classical Dungeons and Dragons boss to have in there. But I think the hardest fight of early access, some people would say the Githyanki fight, which is kind of a boss fight, but it's also the Githyanki Patrol is a boss fight, but it's also just an encounter. That one I had a lot of fun with because, sorry, I'm moving the mic, guys. Because it is so hard, and if you try to do it in that early stage of the game, you really have to be creative. But then I remember coming back in early access and trying things like, the ogre horn or the spectator bottle that you can throw at them, and these different ways that you can get help to go into that fight, because it was really, really hard. But I think the hardest fight for me, and the one that stood out as like my favorite fight of the first act of the game, was Trusol Nair. Trusol Nair is the last of the big bosses that you're going to face in Act 1, who's down there in the Underdark. Although technically, I wonder if that's true, because I guess the mountains, that's not necessarily true. The mountain pass still counts as part of Act 1. So actually, Trusol Nair is not the hardest encounter I faced. No, I'm thinking back on it. It might be. Trusol Nair might be harder than the dude you face in the Githyanki encampment, whose name I don't remember, but I think he's in here somewhere. But Trusol Nair, I think, stood out to me because even in early access, I face rolled on that encounter, like just face planted, I should say, over and over and over. I think I lost that fight 12 or 15 times in early access because they didn't have the tweaked difficulties yet. And then when we got into live, I think I did them the first time without a hitch. But I also played on Explorer mode. But I will say this, even on Explorer mode, I died to quite a few of these bosses as we went through. But True Soul Nair stands out as one of the really cool fights of Act 1. The hag fight is cool, and there's a lot of different ways to deal with Anti-Ethel the Hag in the swamps. That's another one that kind of stood out as an Act 1 fight that's a lot of fun. I don't necessarily think it's that difficult once you understand the mechanics. The first time through, though, I did die to her a few times because when you get down there, not even just dying to her, but there's the failure of losing the lady who's in the cage, whose name I can't remember. But if you want to save her in the burning cage, if you don't have the right things with you, and if you don't do the right things in a quick enough fashion, you can lose her. So there's, the stakes are kind of high in that fight. So even though the mechanics not necessarily be that hard, or the boss might not be that hard, it's still a very interesting encounter in terms of what you have to do. Let me go through here and see if I can find. Oh, the Shadow Druids. That was a fun fight when I found it for the first time, because that's sort of an optional thing that you might not come across unless you do a specific set of events in the swamps and going back to the Druid Ring. But the Shadow Druids was really cool because you can have a completely different outcome for the Druid Ring in terms of that crazy Kara, I forget her name, the really snarky lady who wants to kill the kid with her snake. So that's a really cool encounter. Shadow Druids, Paladins of Tyr. Oh man, I remember on multiplayer with Mujin and Bubbaloni, we failed that fight like I think 3 times on a live stream on normal difficulty, going in there at like level 3, because the triple attack that the main Paladin dude has is just brutal at that level. So really cool fight there. Priestess Gut was pretty easy, I feel. I have a different version of True Soul Nair here. Commander Zalek is really easy on the boat, on the Nautilid coming out. Another version of Paladins of Tyr. Oh, Grim the Golem. I died to that fight. I would actually have to go back and watch that video. I don't remember if I died on him the first time. Yes, I did. Here it is, because I have 2 of them. I have How to Fail, and then I have to. So I did this on a live stream, and I didn't know the mechanics going into it. So the first time around, I figured out the mechanics as we were like dying, and I was like, oh, that's what we need to do. But I was already too far gone, so I came back and did it again on the live stream. So there's back to back. I have a couple of episodes here. It's about an hour's worth of content for the Grim the Golem fight. But that was another standout fight of Act 1. Malice Thorm. Who was Malice Thorm? Oh, that was the creepy dude. That's not an Act 1 fight. So, do I have it over here? Ketheric Thorm. Did I not actually put this fight up? So, there is a fight, and I don't see it here. I've probably got it tagged as something else. When you face Vlaakith, the Githyanki queen, for the very first time in the Githyanki stronghold in the Kresh, in Act 1 in the Mountain Pass, the lead up to that fight, I guess it kind of depends on whether or not you win the conversation rolls or not, but you could have an encounter with her, like the priest lieutenant dude, who's down in there. And that fight, because this was right before I got wished. I wish I could remember the name of that fight. But when you have that encounter, that was actually pretty tough and really cool at the well. But I mean, by the time we got there, we were level, I think, 6 perhaps. But it was really cool is the Githyanki at that point, they've all got like Misty Step and spells and, triple attack. I mean, it's a really gnarly fight because you're facing off against multiple Githyanki, and it's really, really tough, but really, really cool. And then you roll right from that into your confrontation with Vlaakith, and I chose to defy her my first time that I met her, and she literally put a wish spell on me and wished me to die. And I was like, God, whatever. And it literally killed me. And I was like sitting here on a live stream staring at my screen going, did that just happen? So that was a really cool touch to see that happen. And then getting into the second act. Balthazar was a lot of fun. Now, there are a lot of different ways to do Balthazar. I think there's a lot of different ways to do all of these boss fights. But Balthazar, I'm looking down at him right here. I chose to confront him in the Gauntlet of Shards. I didn't take him down to the Night Song. I just, because I was playing a good party, so as soon as I met him and I was like, oh, you're an evil necromancer, I was like, screw you, and I took him out. And that was a pretty easy fight, but also just kind of fun. But then the Ketheric Thorm thing, this is really cool because Ketheric Thorm, the first time you face him on the top of Moonrise Towers, that was a really, really, really fun fight. There's a lot going on in that fight. And it was just really, really cool facing off against Ketheric Thorm. But then I remember that was the first time I had seen my heat armor spell work brilliantly, where he dropped his weapon, he dropped his hammer because it was too hot, and he was just a cakewalk after that. I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. But then when you get down to the bottom of Moonrise Towers and you face, this is a pretty brutal fight, by the way. When you face Ketheric Thorm and the Avatar of Merkel at the bottom of Moonrise Towers, I got extremely lucky in my playthrough with the Druid in that I rolled a nat 20 on getting him to, I think I did. I don't remember I rolled a nat 20, but I remember I beat the DC, which I think was a 20, to convince him to not fight, and he just literally pushes himself back into the void and he dies. So I didn't have to fight him a second time. But the Avatar of Merkel fight I did have to do, and that was quite challenging and quite fun. It's going to be very interesting to see how my sorcerer deals with that going through, because I will, of course, try to beat the conversation roll if I can. Excuse me. But really cool fight. Anything else in second act that I can't remember? Quick commercial break, everyone, to give a shout out to our first official guild officer, Babylonia, as well as all of the guild champions, and of course, all of the members who help keep me on the air full time. To join as a member, simply click that join button below and pick your tier, but you can also support with SuperChats on any live stream or premiere, or SuperThanks on any upload or YouTube short. Don't forget the Discord. Let's get back to the video. I think it's listed as something else. There's a moment when you have to face this the shadow of the druid guy who's been separated, and he's the one causing the curse. So you're helping Halsin to lift the curse, and you have to face him. I can't remember the name of the fight now, but that one was really cool as well. And also helping defend the portal. I've got that up somewhere. That's not a boss fight, but defending the portal for Halsin while he's inside rescuing the dude from the other dimension or whatever. That was a lot of fun as well. And then getting into Act 3, you start getting a lot of boss fights in Act 3. Like Act 1 and 2, there's a few, but they're spread out. But then you get into Act 3, and it's just like you're constantly coming up against big boss encounters, and it's just a hell of a lot of fun, especially once you get to max level, and it's like you're going toe-to-toe with people with these big spells. It's so much fun. So Leroican, the wizard, that was a really hard fight, and also super just super rewarding from a challenge standpoint. An anti-Ethel, that was a really good fight. The second time you face her, so you face her the first time, you think you killed her, and then you get to the city, and it's like, oh no, she didn't die, and now you have to face her a second time. That was a very challenging fight, hell of a lot of fun. Really cool stuff then. The Steel Watcher Titan was a cakewalk. Like, that one doesn't really stick out to me. Delore the Dwarf, that was an easy one. Dror Ragzlin, we've done a few times. Oh, okay, so now we're getting into Sarevok. Sarevok was probably, I think it was the first time when I was playing the game when I kind of sat back and said, "Oh, you guys just surprised me." Like, I did not expect Sarevok to show up, and the way they did it, fitting into the lore of the existing Forgotten Realms universe, was really well done. And it was a super difficult fight, super hard fight. So the Sarevok fight was really, really well done. That was a surprise. And then Orin the Red. And then going over here, let's go back over here. The Farslayer of Ball. Oh, that wasn't really a boss fight. That was an encounter. Lord Gortash, I felt, was a bit of a pushover. That was That was I know some people said they were disappointed by Gortash. I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I definitely expected that fight to be something more. It was a very easy fight. Like I felt like there were Act 2 and 1 bosses that were harder for me to face than Gortash. And maybe it's because I just weakened him so much. I took out the Steel Watchers and I did all these things leading up to him that he just was kind of defenseless when I faced off with him. And of course, the Netherbrain, I haven't actually aired this one yet. This one's airing tomorrow. So actually, no, I'm recording this on the 24th, but I'm going to air this on the 25th. So this evening at some point, I believe it's scheduled for 7 p.m. So you guys are going to be watching this at like 5 a.m. So tonight is going to be the Netherbrain fight. That was a very difficult fight. That's the end of the game. Very hard. But I haven't talked about this one yet because Raphael. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything else. Or in the red, okay. But the Raphael fight to me, everybody, stands out to me as my favorite big bad boss fight of the whole game. Like, it was just so cool because not necessarily because it was the most challenging fight, because it wasn't necessarily challenging. I didn't figure out the columns until I was midway through the encounter. I didn't even see the columns. I was so focused on him and what was going on that I didn't pay attention to the columns until I was like halfway through and I almost died. But I did manage to make it through the first time. But what made it so cool was the music and the song. Down with the claw, and him and Hope singing back and forth to each other in that song made that experience something that was so unique, so curated that it just was cool. It was just really, really, really cool. So when I look back across all of these boss fights that I've faced over the game that I've seen so far, having 40, 50 encounters that I think count as boss fights throughout the game. If I had to pick 3, I would say probably Raphael is my number 1 fight. Saravok is my number 2 fight. Number 3, ooh, that's a good question. I think maybe there's a part of the Netherbrain fight where you're facing off because, well, and it just depends on how the decisions you make. So I chose to face off against the Emperor. I was like, screw you, Emperor. And so he joined the Netherbrain. And so I had to fight him and a red dragon and all these mind flayers trying to get to the Netherbrain. That's like my third. But the number 1, just for sheer fun and enjoyment and the emotions that I experienced when it was happening, was definitely the Raphael fight, followed by Saravok, and then probably facing off against the Emperor because I was so irritated by him the whole game and just really wanted to take him out. So it was very satisfying to go up against him and that red dragon while at the same time dealing with the Netherbrain. With Orpheus at my side, that was a lot of fun. But honestly, guys, like, I've played a lot of games over the years, and I don't know that I've ever played a game that curated the boss fights as good as this game did in terms of a CRPG. I know you could look at like The Witcher 3 still has some of the really cool. Matter of fact, I should do a video on The Witcher 3 boss fights. But The Witcher 3, I think, to me, still stands out as like the best game I've ever played for sheer just difficulty in facing off against big nasty monsters, especially if you're playing on the harder difficulties of Witcher 3 because you need to use your potions and your abilities and your oils and everything else, and time of day is important and all this other stuff, like, and there's a lot of cool stuff in the Witcher 3 for bosses, but the Baldur's Gate 3 has done an exceptional job at giving you that experience, and there's so many of these. I think they said overall there was a little over 300 encounters in the game. I don't know how many I actually came across. Not boss fights, but encounters overall. I definitely came across a couple hundred, but I know I didn't do a completionist version, so I'm sure there's a hell of a lot I still didn't see because I didn't finish the Thieves Guild. There's a bunch of stuff I didn't finish in the third act because I was ready to just finish to get to my sorcerer, because I have other stuff I need to see and do with the sorcerer because it's a complete new party. So stick around. There's more Baldur's Gate 3 coming out. I would love to hear your thoughts. What were your favorite boss fights in the game? Drop those down in the comments below. If you want to see these in action, just go look at my channel and like dig into the playlist or look up Big Bad Boss Fight or how to defeat, and you'll find a list of all these. You can watch these fights, watch the ways I did them with the characters that I played through. But yeah, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Join the Discord, links are down below. Member videos up above, and I'll see everybody in the next video or live stream. Until then, stay safe and happy gaming, everybody.